Churri. 12 boys and their football coach walked into a cave on a dry afternoon. Within hours, rising floodwater sealed every passage behind them. They would not see daylight again for 18 days. In June 2018, the 12 members of the Wild Boars youth football team, aged 11 to 16, finished practice near the town of Mae Sai in northern Thailand. Their assistant coach, 25-year-old Ekapol Chantawong, led them on a familiar trip into the Tham Luang Cave system. It was a local tradition for the boys. They had done it before. The cave stretched more than 10 kilometers into the limestone hills along the Myanmar border. And on a normal dry day, the early chambers were walkable. The group planned a short exploration, maybe an hour inside, then bikes home for dinner. Nothing about the day suggested they would become the center of an international rescue effort. But the monsoon arrived early that year. Rain began falling while the group was already deep inside. In Tham Luang, water does not rise gradually. The cave acts as a drainage system for the surrounding hills. Rainwater funnels through cracks in the limestone, flooding low passages in minutes rather than hours. By the time the boys turned back toward the entrance, their exit was already submerged. They retreated deeper, climbing to higher ground, eventually reaching a muddy shelf called Ner Nom Sao, roughly 4 kilometers from the cave mouth. There, in total darkness, they stopped. They had no food. They had a few small flashlights, and outside the rain kept falling. When the boys failed to come home that evening, their bicycles were found chained near the cave entrance. Rescue teams arrived within hours, but the access tunnels were already flooded. Pumps were deployed immediately. Millions of liters of water were extracted per hour, yet the monsoon replenished it faster than machines could remove it. The cave fought back against every intervention. Each day of rainfall erased whatever progress the pumps had made overnight. The physical constraints were severe. Tham Luang's flooded passages were not open underwater channels. They were tight, silted, zero-visibility tunnels where a diver could barely fit through wearing a single tank. Current flowed against anyone trying to push inward. Some sections required divers to remove their equipment and push it ahead of them to squeeze through restrictions just 60 centimeters wide. Even the most experienced cave divers in the world described sections of this system as among the most dangerous they had encountered. A single wrong turn in that maze, a single equipment snag in those constrictions, and a diver might never come back out. For 9 days, nobody knew if the boys were alive. Thai Navy SEALs pushed forward but were forced back repeatedly by rising water and narrowing passages. Meanwhile, on the surface, volunteers drilled into the mountainside, hoping to find air shafts that might connect to the chamber where the boys sheltered. Farmers upstream diverted streams away from the cave's catchment area. None of it was enough. The water level inside barely dropped. Then on July 2nd, 2 British cave divers, John Volanthen and Richard Stanton, specialists with decades of experience in exactly this kind of flooded, constricted passage, reached the boys. The 13 were alive, huddled on their elevated shelf in the dark. They were thin, dehydrated, but breathing. Volanthen's headlamp illuminated the group, and his first words to them were practical, confirming their number. 9 days of uncertainty ended in a single beam of light. But finding them was not the rescue. It was the beginning of an almost impossible problem. The boys were 4 kilometers from the cave entrance through fully submerged, zero-visibility tunnels. Most of them could not swim. None had ever used dive equipment. A single panic movement underwater in those tight passages could dislodge a regulator, stir blinding silt, or trap both the child and the diver guiding him. And the monsoon forecast showed heavier rain approaching within days. If the water rose further, even the shelf where the boys sheltered would flood completely. The oxygen level inside the chamber was already dropping, falling below 21% as 13 people consumed the limited air in a sealed space. The clock was no longer abstract. It was measured in weather reports and oxygen readings. The rescue planners faced a decision with no safe option: wait, and the boys might drown or suffocate as conditions worsened. Attempt extraction through the flooded tunnels, and inexperienced children could die underwater. The distances involved meant each extraction trip took hours. There was no way to bring all 13 out simultaneously. They would need to go in small groups over multiple days, each trip a separate operation with its own risk of failure. Every additional day of operations meant another day exposed to the monsoon's unpredictability. The decision was made to sedate the boys for transit. An Australian anesthetist, Dr. Richard Harris, who was also an experienced cave diver, administered ketamine and atropine to each child before extraction. The drugs rendered them unconscious and reduced their oxygen consumption, but also meant they could not respond if something went wrong underwater. Each boy was fitted with a full-face mask, wrapped in a wetsuit, and carried through the flooded sections by a relay of divers positioned along the route. If a mask slipped, if a regulator failed, the child could not alert anyone. The divers would have to detect problems by touch alone, in zero visibility, while managing their own survival. The extraction took 3 days. On July 8th, 9th, and 10th, divers brought the boys out in groups of 4, 4, and 5. Each journey through the submerged passages took approximately 3 hours. Along the route, over 100 divers were positioned at air chambers to pass each child forward, check vital signs, and redose sedation when needed. The margins were extraordinarily thin. At least one boy's face mask partially filled with water during transit. Divers corrected it in the dark, underwater, by touch alone. All 13 were extracted alive. On the final day of the operation, as the last group emerged, a pump failed inside the cave. Water surged through the passages the divers had just exited. The rescue teams themselves barely escaped the rising flood. Had the operation extended even one more day, the route would likely have been impassable. The margin between success and catastrophe was measured in hours. One person did die during the overall operation. Saman Gunan, a former Thai Navy SEAL who had volunteered for the rescue, lost consciousness while placing air tanks along the submerged route on July 6th and could not be revived. His death underscored what every diver already understood about the lethal nature of conditions inside those passages. The boys recovered in hospital, initially quarantined due to potential infections from the cave environment. All returned to their families. Coach Ekapol, who had kept the group calm in darkness for over 2 weeks, reportedly led them in meditation to conserve energy and reduce panic during the long days of waiting underground. What the Tham Luang rescue demonstrates is not a triumph of willpower alone. It reveals what happens when environmental conditions dictate an absolute deadline that no amount of human effort can extend. The rain set the clock. Every decision, from sedation to relay positioning to the 3-day extraction schedule, was shaped by the monsoon forecast. The cave was not a static obstacle. It was an active hydrological system, responding to weather in real time, closing the window hour by hour. The rescue succeeded not because conditions improved, but because the operation fit precisely inside the narrowing gap between what was still physically possible and what the monsoon was about to make permanent. They had one shot, and the rain was already falling when the last boy came out.